Hello and welcome to Tracking Trump on deKoder. I'm Nidhi Razdan. And this week, this is a special edition of our show coming to you from Srinagar, my hometown, which has been at the heart of hostilities between India and Pakistan for more than a week now. Those hostilities on the ground have officially ceased, although Operation Sindoor, as the government of India has said, is not yet over. Yet, this entire crisis between the two countries that has escalated to a point we haven't seen in decades has also had an unexpected diplomatic fallout. President Trump of the United States has been taking credit repeatedly for the past few days for brokering a ceasefire between India and Pakistan. Not just taking credit for ending these hostilities, but also saying that the two countries will hold a dialogue at a neutral venue, that he would help to mediate the Kashmir issue, amongst other things. All of these have irritated New Delhi, which has responded point by point to what the president of the US has claimed. The first thing India has made clear is that there was no mediation by the United States, that the hostilities with Pakistan ended bilaterally between the two countries when the DGMOs or the two top military officials from both sides picked up the phone and spoke to each other. Secondly, India has made it clear there's no question of a larger dialogue with Pakistan at the moment. In fact, India has said its red lines are written in stone. The only conversation would be on terrorism and bringing back Pakistan occupied Kashmir. India has rejected third party mediation on the issue. Trump also made a claim that he had threatened to stop trade with India and Pakistan, which is why they ended this escalation. India has said trade was never ever discussed with the US in the conversations that were had with senior officials over the past week. Now, one does wonder, what exactly is Donald Trump trying to do? Is he trying to win the Nobel Peace Prize? How has he inserted himself into this equation? How has he equated India and Pakistan on the same page, especially after a terrorist attack like the one in Pahalgam, which killed 26 innocent people? This is a question that has really upset Delhi, especially given the fact that ties with the United States have seen a sea change over the past decade. We've become much closer to the US. We are part of an alliance known as the Quad. And what Donald Trump has done could have serious ramifications for this bilateral relationship and the wider strategic relationship that the two countries share as well.
On Saturday, my administration helped broker a full and immediate ceasefire, I think a permanent one, between India and Pakistan, ending a dangerous conflict of two nations with lots of nuclear weapons. And they were going at it hot and heavy, and it was seemingly not going to stop. We helped a lot. And we helped also with trade. I said, come on, we're going to do a lot of trade with you guys. Let's stop it. Let's stop it. If you stop it, we're doing trade. If you don't stop it, we're not going to do any trade. People have never really used trade the way I used it. That I can tell you. And all of a sudden they said, I think we're going to stop. Let's not trade nuclear missiles. Let's trade the things that you make so beautifully. And they both have very powerful leaders, very strong leaders, good leaders, smart leaders. And it all stopped. Hopefully it'll remain that way. Actually getting along. Maybe we can even get them together a little bit, Marco, where they go out and have a nice dinner together. Wouldn't that be nice? But we've come a long way, and that's could be, millions of people could have died from that conflict.
भारत की आक्रामक कार्रवाई के बाद पाकिस्तान बचने के रास्ते खोजने लगा। पाकिस्तान दुनिया भर में तनाव कम करने के लिए गुहार लगा रहा था और बुरी तरह पीटने के बाद इसी मजबूरी में 10 मई की दोपहर को पाकिस्तानी सेना ने हमारे डीजीएमओ को संपर्क किया। पाकिस्तान की तरफ से जब ये कहा गया कि उसकी ओर से आगे कोई आतंकी गतिविधि और सैन्य दुस्साहस नहीं दिखाया जाएगा, तो भारत ने भी उस पर विचार किया। और मैं फिर दोहरा रहा हूं, हमने पाकिस्तान के आतंकी और सैन्य ठिकानों पर अपनी जवाबी कार्रवाई को अभी सिर्फ स्थगित किया है। मैं आज विश्व समुदाय को भी कहूंगा, हमारी घोषित नीति रही है, अगर पाकिस्तान से बात होगी तो टेररिज्म पर ही होगी। अगर पाकिस्तान से बात होगी तो पाक ऑक्युपाइड कश्मीर पीओके उस पर ही होगी।
Well, joining us on Tracking Trump today is senior diplomat and former Deputy National Security Advisor, Mr. Pankaj Saran. Thank you very much, Ambassador Saran, for joining us on the program. I want to begin by asking you, we've seen not just one, but now a series of statements from the US president who's trying to claim credit for this ceasefire between India and Pakistan. And he, seems to have not got the memo, perhaps, that New Delhi isn't quite happy with this. Is there? I mean, what do you think the motivation is for him to be so public about this and to make these statements?
Yeah, thank you, Nidhi. I think, firstly, of course, it is his nature. I mean, it's not anything to do specifically with this incident, but if you look at his track record, he's very fond of going to the social media and publicizing so many things at the spur of the moment. So that's one aspect of his personality, which I think explains some of it. The second, of course, is that it was a successful stoppage to a potentially serious conflict. So, and the Americans were involved. So I think he was very, very tempted to personally take the credit, because success is something which he is very keen to have on all fronts. He's succeeding somewhere, not succeeding elsewhere. So this, I think, was one of those situations where he, or the Americans rather, did manage to pause the fighting. That does not, of course, mean that it explains fully and accurately the kind of role that the Americans played. And I think there is a difference between the way he's projecting it and maybe the reality, which I think is quite different.
I think that's an important point, because we've seen India-Pakistan conflicts before, where the international community has stepped in, not necessarily to be mediators, but perhaps to push the conversation along in the right direction, whether it's been the US or the Saudi Arabia or the UAE. So if you could explain that to our viewers, Ambassador Saran, the nuance of that. I mean, what possibly could have happened, and what is being projected actually by the White House?
I think from everything that we have heard from the officials and the so-called sources from the inside of the system, firstly, I have to say that, as you know very well yourself, we will never know the real facts for a long, long time. In fact, even on all the previous incidents of where the US has played a role in the last 20 years or 25 years, the accounts of actually what happened have continued to trickle in, and we've never really got to know the inside story. So I just want to leave that point where we are. But having said that, and subject to all of that, whatever we are hearing from the Indian sources is that the US role was limited. I think what happened was that the success depends on the ground situation, and I think in this case, the ground situation was very different from all previous such crises. By that I mean that the Indians had created an enormous amount of pressure by the morning of the 10th on the Pakistanis in terms of targeting 11 massive strikes, which included, 6 air bases, 2 airstrips, 3 radar stations. So it was a huge strike that I think created the groundwork for the Pakistanis to then talk to the Americans. And by then, I think the Americans, it seems, had also detected movement of certain assets on the Pakistani front. And must have been a very quick conversation between the two, which precipitated and triggered the decision by the Pakistanis to pick up the phone and talk to the Indians. So I don't think there was much of mediation out here. But also, I would like to bring to your notice that when Pahalgam happened on 22nd of April and when Sindoor happened on the 7th of May, between the 22nd and the 7th, the Indian side was not holding back in terms of publicly and diplomatically telling its friends and partners what it was planning to do. So it was not done by subterfuge or through any hidden means. I think the
Absolutely.
intention was conveyed to everyone, and I think that was a big difference this time. That there was nothing done which caught anyone by surprise. And the
Right.
point that was also made, in the conversations between the Indians and the Americans preceding the stoppage or the pause, was this whole issue of the Indian intent, that if you hit, I will hit harder. If you stop, I will stop. So the messaging from the American point of view this time around was actually much easier than in the past.
Except what I did find troubling was that when President Trump has spoken first on his social media platforms and subsequently even in Saudi Arabia where he's currently on a visit, he has not made a single mention of cross-border terrorism from Pakistan. Even when he's talked about the cessation of hostilities or a ceasefire, as he put it, there is no mention of terrorism. There is no mention of that at all. It actually has brought the focus back to this being an India-Pakistan conflict with Kashmir very much at the center of it. And I think that is something that would not go down well in New Delhi, isn't that, Ambassador Sir?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, the initial reactions from the Americans, the State Department, White House, and all did, of course, focus on the Pahalgam terrorist attack. But yes, you are right that when it came to the crunch, when it came to, let us say, the 8th, ninth, and the 10th, there was no reference, and clearly there was element of hyphenation between India and Pakistan, and clearly this is not going to go down well with the Indian establishment. I think the Americans know it, and I really don't think hyphenation by the Americans is going to change ground realities, because I really think that the Indians do not believe there is any hyphenation possible or justified. And so it doesn't really matter now to the Indian side. I think that's a big change from the past. There is greater self confidence in your abilities and a greater determination. And I think this all came through so graphically in the Prime Minister's address to the nation on the 12th of May, about how India sees itself, most importantly, as the victim, and basically saying that the victim cannot be equated with the perpetrator. So, to at one level, uh, to be kind of pretty blunt, it doesn't matter what the Americans are saying.
But at another level, isn't it important for the international community to also see India as that victim and Pakistan as the perpetrator of terror? We also saw a major IMF loan going through during the height of this crisis. And at some level, the international community too has to take its blinkers off and realize that we're not dealing with an ordinary state, Pakistan. It is a state sponsor of terrorism. And it would help, wouldn't it, if you had the United States and other Western countries firmly in your corner.
Yeah, I mean, of course. But if you remember, the first few statements from the United States in the first few days were rather different from the statements that were made on the 10th. In the first few days, the line the Americans were taking was, we're going to stay out of this. Now, the moment you say that you're going to stay out of this, that we're not going to get involved, it basically means that you, in a sense, have given the freedom to the Indians to do what they think was essential and necessary to be done. So, from that point of view, I think there was a shift. I mean, you can see a kind of a two-phase U.S. Approach to the whole problem. I mean, it was not as if from the 22nd of April they started talking about de-escalation. They started equating India and Pakistan. They let the whole thing run its course for the first almost, let's say, 10, 11, 12 days, starting from the 22nd. They came in only on literally the ninth night and the 10th morning. So from the 22nd till the ninth, I think we pretty much had a free hand to do what we needed to do in terms of bringing the terrorists and the camps and the infrastructure to justice.
But aren't
And
you worried?
some of the state,
Sorry, if I could just interrupt, aren't you a little concerned that I agree with you that the US statements, in fact, had a very different tone and tenor. In fact, that's what our program focused on last week. But President Trump's statements, where he's sort of hyphenated the relationship again, focused on Kashmir and India Pakistan, as opposed to India being the victim of terrorism. Are you concerned that this could embolden elements within the Pakistani military to think that they have a free pass going ahead to do something?
I think they'll make a big mistake. Frankly, there is a point beyond which diplomatic support cannot translate into hard national power and support. So if they are going to rely on an American imagined support to do something more or to continue on this path, they will make a big mistake, because I think what has been shown in this episode is that pretty much regardless of what the international opinion is, India is pretty clear on what it is going to do and what it needs to do. So I think that's, if you talk about how things are different from the past, I think this is one fundamental change. It's a break of a psychological barrier within India, that rather than looking over your shoulders about who is saying what and how much support you are getting, I think this time around there was huge confidence in your ability, national ability, to do what you think had to be done. So from that point of view, I think we are in a different space and spot than we were in previous such crises with Pakistan. So I think that's where we are today.
Finally, Ambassador Saran, how do you see Donald Trump's statements potentially impacting the overall relationship with the US, which actually has been on a more or less even keel in his second term, despite all the headwinds he's had with other friends and allies around the world? Actually, with India, it's been a pretty good relationship. We're also in the middle of very crucial negotiations on tariffs with the Americans. Uh, but does this have serious potential to dent that?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, look, among various countries of the world, India has been one of the few which has always sounded positive about the Trump administration, Trump 2.0, compared to even his European allies and friends. So we actually stood apart in terms of being bullish about the new Trump administration. But it's not as if we are rosy eyed. I think people in India know that there is a strong streak of a conservative orthodox approach in Washington, D.C. on this whole question of India and Pakistan. Luckily, this has come to the fore very early on in his tenure, and therefore it will be a good wake up call for Indian realists and Indian strategic planners on how much to rely on the United States. Having said that, there is a lot that is going on bilaterally in the relationship, in the technology, defense, trade, and so on and so forth. And I see that continuing, but it will be a reality check. But what I would also like to say is that, look, if the Americans they take this mediation thing seriously, it will be a big mistake, I feel, for them, because they're welcome to try, but it's a quagmire, and if they get into this and take this thing seriously, I'm afraid that's all they'll be doing for the next 4 years. And at the end of 4 years, they'll have no success either. So I don't think that's the place where they want to be at all in any way. And I'm sure his advisors will be telling him the same thing: don't touch this. So one thing is to manage a given crisis, the other is to try and solve the conflict. And if you assume that the conflict is Kashmir and nothing else, then you're making a double mistake, because firstly, Kashmir is not the silver bullet which is going to create peace forever between India and Pakistan. And secondly, generations have got into this, but those who are clever have voluntarily decided they're not going to get into this. So just for the sake of the Trump administration and the relationship, I just hope that they do not, and I do not think they will. I think they are mature enough and they have experienced hands in the setup not to get into this, because as I said, it's a quagmire. It's something. It's a bottomless pit. They'll never be able to come out of it.
Well, that's assuming that Mr. Trump listens to any sort of sane voices, if there are any around him, because at the moment they seem to be pretty condescending. We even saw Donald Trump Jr. tweet that, there are finally adults in the room that were able to sit together and broker peace between India and Pakistan. So one hopes, as you said, that they listen and they realize that it's futile. And, perhaps the conversation isn't about Kashmir and that India has actually shifted it to water rather than the Kashmir issue. Ambassador Saran, I have to leave it at that today, but thank you very much for giving us your perspective on this aspect of the diplomatic fallout of the recent tensions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Nidhi. Thank you very much.
Well, joining us now on Tracking Trump is Professor Daniel Markey, Senior Fellow with the Foreign Policy Institute of Johns Hopkins University. He's joining us from Washington, D.C. Professor Markey, thank you very much for being with us. We're really trying to understand, President Trump's repeated statements. It seems like he's got an alarm clock set every day that I have to say something on the India-Pakistan ceasefire. How do you view his repeated assertions that he was the one who brokered this ceasefire? Is his White House really so unaware that this is upsetting India?
It's a great question, and I think you have hit on a part of our president's personality and his style of politics, which is clearly that he intends to and makes a point of taking credit for all kinds of things, whether or not that credit is well-deserved, whether or not it is appreciated by others, and in this case, India, is less material to him than the taking of the credit. It is also clear, as you pointed out, that he continues to repeat this, which suggests that perhaps his advisors are unwilling or unable to share with him the deep concerns that I have certainly seen, I think everybody's seen, coming out of India about this portrayal of events and how this might be detrimental to the US-India relationship. And that's problematic because it suggests that maybe he's not getting great advice on a variety of things. Perhaps his advisors are unable, unwilling to share with him bad news. And this would be in the category of things that he might not like to hear and would prefer to focus on something else. So that's my interpretation of it. We'll see if this continues or if this shifts, if this reflects an actual policy decision, or if this is in fact more about style and not great information flow.
What, in your view, would potentially be the damage to the India-US relationship as a result of this? Because as we were discussing with Ambassador Pankaj Saran just before you came on, in the first week or 10 days after the Pahalgam massacre, the US position on that attack, the fact that India was a victim of terrorism, was very unequivocal and clear. Whereas President Trump now, with his statements on the ceasefire, seems to have forgotten that India was a victim of terrorism here, has made no mention of that, and equated India and Pakistan essentially on the same page. That, as we know, has not gone down well in Delhi, but the painstaking work that's gone into the India-US relationship, could that really be damaged with this?
I'm worried about the US-India relationship for these reasons that you've identified. I think there are other reasons to have concerns as well. If you had, say, going back 6 months or 8 months ago, if you had said that the United States would impose or threaten to impose significant tariffs on trade with India, or that the United States would send back to India in shackles and televised illegal migrants, neither of these would have been welcome in India. And I think most analysts of the US-India relationship would have appreciated just how dangerous this would be for trying to push forward in the US-India relationship as we have in the past. Now you add to that President Trump's continued harping on Kashmir, on his desire to bring India and Pakistan together, on what looks to many Indian viewers as a rehyphenation of the India-Pakistan relationship. None of this is helpful. At the same time, I think there are broader structural reasons why the United States would like to and will continue to want to work with India, and vice versa. I think there are many reasons why India will want to continue to work with the United States. I just worry that this may be a friction or cause or a distraction or cause delays to what otherwise looked to be an accelerating partnership. Remember that we had that early meeting from Prime Minister Modi to Washington and a lot of very positive momentum right out of the gate. So it'd be a shame to sacrifice that.
If you could also explain to us the context of the US Pakistan relationship, which went from being a very close relationship at one point, particularly after 9/11, to a point where when Mr. Trump was president in his first term, I think he held back aid to Pakistan for the very reasons that India today is highlighting Pakistan's role as far as cross-border terrorism is concerned. And yet today he makes no mention of terror groups operating from there. So it seems a bit schizophrenic to us sitting here. But what is the context in which this is happening?
It looks a little bit odd to me as well. So it's not just an Indian perspective. If you had asked me to guess what the Trump administration's strategy for Pakistan would have been immediately upon assuming office, I would have assumed that it would be cold, somewhat distant, perhaps narrowly focused on areas of continued mutual interest, and in particular on striking against international terrorists like Al-Qaeda, based in Afghanistan, and some of whom may still be based in parts of Pakistan. There were areas of potential cooperation, but it would have been narrow. This shift now, or apparent shift, to a more positive vision of Pakistan is surprising. And I don't know exactly how we should read it. My sense is that it may be reflective, again, of a Trump administration that hasn't given systematic or considered policy thought to the nature of the US-Pakistan relationship, maybe retreating to some positions that President Trump had all the way back when he met with Imran Khan years ago during his last administration, and maybe most of all, reflect a very serious and I think widespread desire, not just within the Trump administration, but in Washington generally, to avoid a serious escalation of this conflict between India and Pakistan. So this may fall in the category of things the administration will say to take Pakistan and India out of a crisis. And maybe after that, we'll revert back to a language and a set of policies that look a little bit more expected, or at least what I would have expected from the outset.
My final question really is on, and you touched upon that in a sense, about the escalation of the conflict. President Trump made an assertion that a nuclear war was avoided between India and Pakistan. India says that there was no question of this going nuclear. It was a conventional sort of a battle that played out in a limited sense. Now, there seems to be an impression in India that Pakistan uses the nuclear card when it wants the West to intervene, and it's sort of the Hail Mary that they keep turning to. Is that your assessment as well? I mean, how serious are the concerns in Washington that there could actually be a nuclear war?
I think the concerns are real, but I think what we're dealing with is a very low likelihood of an extraordinarily disastrous outcome. And when you're a policymaker sitting in Washington and you're faced with that calculation, it's hard to know exactly how that goes. A very low likelihood, even during this crisis, I don't think that US analysts anticipated the near-term use of nuclear weapons by either side. So in that respect, in some ways, they resemble what you've ascribed to the Indian position. At the same time, any nuclear use would be extraordinarily devastating. And so in a sense, not worth the risk. And you suggest that Pakistan may manipulate America's risk aversion to its advantage. And I would say, yes, probably they do. And I think the reality, though, is that they know this, we know this, but the very fact that Pakistan is nuclear armed gives it that ability to manipulate the United States in this way. And it will forever, I think, unfortunately, be difficult for the United States to escape that kind of manipulation. The risk is just real.
But then that, in a sense, is blackmail by Pakistan, isn't it? You get the IMF.
It may well be. It may well be, and that's,
yeah.
in a sense, that's why the United States would have very much preferred that Pakistan never have nuclear weapons to begin with. For the same reason the United States is very concerned about Iran having a nuclear program or North Korea. These kinds of weapons give even less powerful states the ability to play games that are very dangerous. And that's the deeper concern, certainly here in Washington. And I think there will be a difference of opinion ultimately between India and the United States on just how much of a risk either side would like to run.
Thank you very much, Professor Markey, for your perspective there from the US on not just India, Pakistan, but the US intervention and the unlikely way in all this is played out diplomatically. Thank you very much for joining us.
Of course. Thank you.
And that's it on Tracking Trump this week. We'll be back next week with another episode. Who knows what will happen? A week is a very long time in Trump land, as we all know. See you then. Goodbye.